The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is touting a new strategic partnership with China in talks with Xi Jinping in Beijing as part of what he has said is a new world order, in part due to the fallout from Trump tariffs in the United States. Now, there's been a noticeable tone shift from Ottawa towards Beijing as Carney wraps up the first state visit to China by a Canadian leader in more than 8 years. Now, after a lengthy diplomatic chill, the two nations have signed a series of agreements, including an energy pact that could see more Chinese investment in Canada and open up opportunities for China to buy more Canadian oil and LNG. Also, in quite a breakthrough, Carney says Canada will allow 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into Canada at a tariff of just 6.1%, down from 100%. Xi reciprocated, according to Carney, by reducing its 100% ag tariff on canola or rapeseed to 15%. Xi Jinping hailed the talks as having achieved positive results.
Oh, good everything. Good everything, Dr. Carr. Hey, good morning. Good everything to everybody. You are, I don't know if you're muted, but we cannot hear you. Can we hear you? Yes, you're muted. That's okay.
So let me unmute myself and make sure.
Hi.
Why are you laughing? Good everything. Hi.
Well, I pulled this clip for yesterday, but you know, on the Karen Hunter show on Fridays is Foolishness Friday. So I started off very foolish and I didn't want to make a hard pivot into this because it's a serious topic. And as I was preparing for today, I was thinking about all of the people who came to this country fleeing tyranny, fleeing fascism, fleeing, you know, horrible conditions. And then they come here and then they want to bar the door for anybody else coming here. But we may be those people and these other countries don't want us. And now we've isolated ourselves and everybody else is like, oh, we don't mess with them anymore. We're going to mess with each other because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And that puts us in a very precarious situation. Now, we still got nuclear weapons and stuff, but that doesn't change the dynamic of how we as Americans are viewed, but we are global citizens. It's a very interesting position that we find ourselves in. And I'm just glad that you're starting here.
Well, we are starting here. We meaning you, me, and everybody here. Beyond that, yeah, those pronouns, I don't know, those of you on Urban View, you know, I had to, we have that little dash of foolishness Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, my king. And he tried to say we one morning this week, and I don't know that it turned out very well for him. But so when you say we, you mean people who live in the United States who are U.S. citizens. I suppose that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah,
you don't have a nuclear alliance code, and neither do I.
No,
so when you say we have nuclear weapons, we don't have nuclear weapons.
Correct. You know, Dr. Carr, it's an interesting kind of brain separation. You know, like we Black folk, those of us who have African enslaved descendancy, have had to separate,
or anyone who
I'm specifically people whose parents were or great grandparents were enslaved. There's evidence that we had to separate the hemispheres of our brain to pick more cotton. And I'm sure that's the same for the people who were in the Caribbean islands and, you know, places. Anybody that was enslaved had to go through a thing with the torture to have to come up with 500 pounds of cotton every day, right? I'm saying that we live in double consciousness. I think it's been written about where, you know, you're in a thing, you're not of a thing. I think the Bible talks about that as well. But, you know, those of us who have been here for several generations, and even those who come and made this home, it's an adjustment, you know, almost like a person who's lost hundreds of pounds. You know, your brain has to catch up with the actual physical body that you're in. And we're now in a physical body that's been hostile. But I think a lot of us are now realizing, you know, how do you pledge allegiance to this?
I don't.
Yeah.
I'll be damned. Yeah. My capacity to have the same rights as anyone else in this society is defined by my humanity. And in the legal universe, unfortunately, there is a diminished form of humanity globally called citizenship. that is a direct result of European colonialism, Treaty of Westphalia, the formation of nation states, and the idea of citizenship. And unfortunately, every country on the globe has caught that disease. Citizenship is a cancer. Those who argue for it, we can have a robust conversation. Pat, come on in the office hours. We'll talk about pros and cons of citizenship, but I'm saying I don't have to pledge allegiance to the United States of America. I think it's an absurd concept for anyone who is the descendant of those who were trafficked anywhere in the world. And as far as the status of our humanity, those who never picked a ball, much less the bale of cotton, those who never chopped sugar cane or dealt in indigo or rice, have inherited, because they are of African descent, the same wretched condition, to quote David Walker, that we have. Ask the Somalis in Minnesota whether they're descended from those trafficked to the Western Hemisphere, or whether they never left the continent of Africa before a generation ago, whether or not they are Black. And regardless of our differences between each other, I think a fundamental challenge we have in this country and in the world is understanding our deep, deep connection to each other.
Yeah, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that.
No. I mean, it's no argument. I'm just saying I want to be clear before we go.
Well, even folk that come here from Somalia or other parts of Africa and, London or wherever, there's a sense that they come into a thing that is better than the thing that they left. And then they're looking and searching for, the opportunities that have been promised. And many of them have taken advantage of it, but it's a different experience for them. And now whatever they fled, there's Liberian refugees, quote unquote refugees, and all the folk that have come here, I've talked to them, interviewed folk, for them now they're in a situation where you might have the same conditions that you left here. And quite frankly, how do you navigate that? Again, we've been told lies our whole life, and many of us, I could just remember sitting in class with you 5 years ago, and I never learned this stuff, and I was a good student. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and
all of us. I ain't learned it either.
So you get angry and frustrated, and as you're pulling the thread on this thing, you realize, oh, I've been taught this on purpose. I had a professor, Greek and Latin studies, on the show this week, and he, because of you, I'm not a scholar, but I'm hitting him with questions, and he couldn't answer them. He couldn't answer them. He teaches at Vassar, and he was so stumped and flummoxed, and at the end, I could see his little poor brain just like, wow,
What happened? What did he wrote a book?
Yeah, he wrote a book about how white nationalists use Greek and Roman history to bolster their claim on you. Yeah. I know you have it.
Yeah,
I know you have.
Yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, we talked about it during office hours. Yeah, exactly right. It's a kind of, well, let me not give a full critique because I haven't finished reading it. But when I picked it up, and I'd have to find it now. I don't know what I did with it. It's around here somewhere. In fact, I moved it. But the whole, here it is.
Yeah.
The white pedestal, how white nationalists use ancient Greece and Rome to justify hate.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting book, but
it's an interesting premise. But
the first thing I did was go to the index and look for what he didn't put in. And at that point, they told me the deep
my first
flaw in the book
was why not go back another 1,000 years? And I was like, and did not the Moors conquer that region at some point? Like when we talk about pure race of people, and the Europeans attaching them, you're attaching yourselves to people if you believe that race is more than a made-up construct, because it is a made-up construct. Weren't they sullied by folk that came from the continent of, like, it's unreal how people have allowed themselves to digest absolute lies and nonsense, and then they wear it like a comfortable coat.
It's really unfortunate. It really is. It's funny. It's been a couple of minutes because I don't know Professor Dozier. Like I said, I mentioned him. It was just Monday night. I'm sure he's very nice.
Nice guy.
I'm sure he's very nice. I mean, I in fact, after I bought the book, I said, I wonder if this is a guy I would like to talk with. He mentions Martin Bernal only one time, and that's on page 9 of the book, of course. when he says the most well-known of these critical studies of the historical entanglement of scholarship on Greco-Roman antiquity and white supremacy is the first volume of Mark Bernal's Black Athena. And he talks about, yeah, of course, and he talks about that the public controversy and academic backlash against Black Athena. And of course, I'm thinking about people like Mary Lefkowitz, and Guy, what's his last name? I'll see his book over there, Black Athena Revisited. That's the debate they had that was in New York when the Chiefs League moderated, and Dr. Clark said he had spent his whole life studying and he's not coming here to debate with anyone because having studied this stuff for his entire life and taught it, he only debates his equals, all others he teaches. That was the critics of Mark Bernal. And with a passing gesture toward Charles Chestnut, Anna Cooper, and W.B. Du Bois, Professor Dozier centers Martin Bernal because, until a white scholar says it's not legitimate. And with that, he was done with Black folk and Black classicists. There's another couple of passing references. At that point, I realized that the deep flaw in his analysis made it difficult. Well, that's not true because he talks about Black classicists. He does mention the Black classicists, and he mentions, of course, Frank Snowden, who is their favorite, who wrote a book called Blacks in Antiquity, was on Howard's Factory for a long time. But, with all due respect to Professor Dozier and all the rest of these cats who are writing about this, they can't see it for their whiteness.
Right. No, when I asked him, so as we're talking, he's coming to these like revelations in real time. Some of the Nubians were in the chat was like, "Oh, you got him out here." But I said to him, like, how do you continue to teach something that you now know is not true? Like your whole dissertation is on. So you have a PhD in a thing that if you just went back another 1,000 years falls completely apart. But now you are teaching the next generation, and it makes it difficult, and I could see him like, like, are you going to get no one's asking you to give up your career, but at some point we got to be like I did in the classroom. I'm like, I don't know what journalism is, so I'm gonna have to make a pivot. I can't teach what I was taught because it doesn't exist anymore. And that to me is malfeasance, to send people out into the streets with a head full of information that is no longer applicable. And so that's our responsibility, those of us who care about truth and knowledge and dissemination of it, to really examine, what am I doing? Where, what am I really doing in these seats? It's interesting. Yeah.
Well, this is it's actually germane to what we're talking about now. I'm glad you talked with him. Of course, you need to have those dialogues. I don't, he is as 10 toes down committed to white supremacy as the people he's critiquing. And this isn't a question of his likes and dislikes and desires, but rather his fidelity to a very narrow view of the world that was centered the Greeks. He doesn't like how the Greeks were used by the Kevin Roberts and the Heritage Foundations of the world. He doesn't like how the Greeks were used by the neoclassicists, as they might call them, in the 19th century, and the phrenologists of the late 19th, early 20th century. He doesn't like how it was used. But what he absolutely is committed to as a professor of Greek and Roman studies is that genealogy. So if you take that,
how would he stop doing that? If your whole
I don't know, and I don't care enough to spend any more of my life attempting to plead for my humanity to him. In other words, what I'm saying is, when you pour a clean glass of water, you will come or you won't. Before Dr. Ben made transition, and shout out again to another ancestor, our brother James Turner, who was at Cornell for decades. James Turner made it possible to have Yosef Ben Yakinen and John Henry Clark lecture as visiting professors at Cornell. Teach classes. And Dr. Ben talks about Martin Bernal sitting in his class. So when Martin Bernal, whose grandfather, by the way, Sir Alan Gardner, wrote the Egyptian grammar that I learned hieroglyphs on alongside Mario Beatty and Bleakley Watkins, Martin Bernal was born into a family of classicists who had a more expansive view of the ancient world, which centered ancient Egypt. But when he wrote Black Athena Volume 1 and then Volume 2 and then died before Volume 3 came out, and I remember reading it when I was in graduate school, I laughed about it because Jacob Carruthers and Theophilo Benga and everybody, Ivan Van Serber, you name it, who have been talking about this stuff for years, St. Clair Drake, Black Folks Here and There, volumes 1 and 2, who writes about what he calls the old scrappers. Anderson Thompson kind of coined that term as well. Martin Bernal becomes the authority because of his genealogy. And Martin Bernal, in volume 1, as Professor Rozier notes, in passing, on page 9 of a several hundred page book, volume 1 was entitled The Fabrication of Ancient Greece. But this man, Rozier, who knows better? And if you say, I didn't know, that's a lie, because didn't you quote Martin Bernal? Did you even say volume 1? You know damn well the Greeks didn't hold that weight in antiquity. But your commitment, and perhaps it's because you think you're too old, is to a narrow, and I'm not going to call it a lie, a narrow lens through which to not only order the world, but reinforce the order by teaching your students that when you talk about character, when you talk about the polis, as we talked about when we talked about the social structure category when we did the second iteration of our class, when you talk about democracy and all these words, you are so committed to that narrow interpretation of how humans organize themselves that you will say those who are deep racists, who are using that to say that white people are better, are absolutely in violation of the traditions of the Greeks, when you know that the Greeks themselves said we went to Egypt to study.
That's right. That's
so you quoted Martin Bernal and then turned around and doubled down on it. So you, sir, are what I would call a soft white nationalist. You want everybody to live. It's good. It's kiki. It's all nice. But you would never get rid of your intellectual foundations. And it's not my job to try to get you to, because the as you say, Prof, we are the global majority. Yeah. And since we're the global majority, when we reclaim our narratives, either y'all will, to quote Beanie Siegel from Philadelphia, you'll either get down or you'll lay down. Oh, and I don't have to talk. I don't have to talk to you no more.
Yeah. Let me just say, Frances Cress Welsing is where the global majority, and I'm sure she also was quoting someone. But because this is how we used to learn. Nobody had to take credit for no one. It was just knowledge that we passed down from generation to generation. This is where we are. And I'm glad you started here. By the way, if you're joining us on the YouTube side or Facebook or any place else, if you want more of this amazing man, office hours on Monday nights in Nubia, which is a community of folk that are gathered to learn and grow and spread goodness and this kind of stuff. Office hours, Dr. Greg Carr holds court. He's teaching the Africana Studies class. They're going to be reading Born in Blackness starting in next week, couple of weeks from now. And
26th, 26th, the week from Monday.
Yeah. So that's community.knarrative.com, or you can go to the App Store and join Nubia through the App Store. But that's that. And on tomorrow, Kevin Powell will be screening When We Free the World in Nubia, as well as, of course, we have Dr. Sinyata and Dr. Narissa in the mornings, but in the afternoon, Kevin Powell will be screening his documentary, which is exclusive to in that kind of community before it goes out widely, so Nubians can join us there as well. But why did you want to start with Mark Carney today? I love it.
We know about, and by the way, you all know the when we start on the just the homework for everybody had the homework, and I'm going to send the syllabus to Amaya to put on the web page on our Nubia homepage. Week 1 we're going to do for Born in Blackness, which is not this week, but the following week, 26th, we start in office hours. We're going to do the introduction, the front and back matter, meaning the covers of the book, the inside, the blurbs. And if you have the paperback, you still have the covers. And then we're going to do the introduction. And then the following week, week 2, we're going to go into part 1 of Born in Blackness, which is the discovery of Africa, pages 17 through 86. So, but everybody will have this. I'm just letting people know. And if you, like you said, if you're in the YouTube space or we're on Facebook now, that's we on Facebook. Okay. I love it. We go join Knarrative. Come on in. This is what we do. And I'm glad that, of course, we, as everybody knows who's been here for a moment, we don't rehearse or lay out how we're going to go, but we are of the same mind. Prof, as you know, as we know, you and I know, and as the world knows at this point, after almost 6 years, we are of the same mind. So we are starting the same way. We started with Mark Carney because Mark Carney, to borrow from contemporary Africana cultural meaning making, I would never call anything we do in terms of language slang. Again, but culture meaning making. Mark Carney set it off in Beijing. See, to talk like that isn't talk you say before you do something. That's talk you say very quietly or loudly, in this case, after you have done something that is unassailable. So for him to say that and then to end his introductory statement after several days of negotiation where he brought his cabinet there, and you see one by one, they're shaking hands as they say sign these trade deals, import, export. And the biggest thing about those deals wasn't just the export of the oil, the canola oil from from China. Getting a little bit ahead of myself with a scene. Some of y'all know about that Asian network, but trade network, that is. And this is about trade, because they asked him afterward, what did you mean? And then he explained trade. That's what it's about. But that was big. The big one, though, was at nearly 50,000 electric vehicles. BYD, now the largest electric vehicle maker in the world, passed the racist Elon Musk in 2025. Sorry, not sorry. Apartheid friend. And they're going to let almost 50,000 of those cars, not just BYD, but the other Chinese electric vehicle makers. Since the Chinese market is kind of is in a glut, as you can imagine. And then you see them shaking hands one after one. And then at the end there at the table sitting there, he says, this is the next step toward it. And then, as if each one of those three words were a hot iron poke into the eye of Bozo, little south from, as Howard French calls it in Florida, born in blackness, that vast expanse of ice called Canada, which was a British colony and French one as well. Shout out to Quebec. Mark Carney says new world order. Tap, tap, tap. He slows it down just in case, because Bozo fuming now. He's taking half of his cabinet to China next week to try to wait. No, not China. Where is he going? Oh yeah, Davos. Bozo going to Davos to talk that talk, but he's not talking with the calm and reserve of Mark Carney, who is taking steps toward doing something different in world history, at least the last several hundred years. Bozo's sounding increasingly unhinged. It isn't just his mental illness, which is well documented by all of us who have actually seen him with eyes or heard him with ears. His lying press secretary and doctors notwithstanding. It's that Bozo is increasingly desperate. My man Gerald Horne says that he said this week, I was listening to a conversation that Gerald was having with the good brother Kalanji Chamajanga in Atlanta. And Gerald said Trump and his crew are going from America first to America's first. They look desperate now, but we'll get to all this. So we want to start with Mark Carney because, this is the new world order. If y'all remember, everyone remembers, of course, that Anthony Mackie vehicle, Captain America, Brave New World, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that vast money-making machine helmed at this point by the Russo brothers, was pumping out, still pumping out the television shows, the movies. Of course, Doomsday is due this year, the Avengers, followed by Secret Wars. And if any of you all read any of the comics, you know what's going to happen with Doomsday and then Secret Wars, one of the most successful comic runs series in Marvel history, through Avengers, X-Men, and so forth. So they're going to make all the money in the world. But they were setting it up. They had to make a slight adjustment because, of course, with Jonathan Majors and what happened to his career in terms of this kind of being expelled, at least temporarily, from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that's the interesting thing about the multiverse. You can bring anybody back anytime. Looks like they were going to go for the Kang dynasty. That was where it was going with Kang, but they had to quickly regroup. But if you remember, all of the things that were slotted to kind of emerge in one way that are now going to continue to emerge, but in another way. And it's almost looking like, let me not get into the comic stuff because some of y'all are deep comic fans. Even if you're just only fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you can pretty much predict what's about to happen next in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with the Avengers. But Anthony Mackie's part of that calculus. Steve Rogers travels back in time, and perhaps that sets off the multiverse, as it did Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness and all this kind of thing. But I'm just coming to this point, and then we'll continue because we haven't really stopped. Anthony Mackie's movie was titled Captain America: New World Order. And then you have a little problem of the election and anticipating what could happen, as Bozo did not die politically because his friends in the Clavern, his friends in the insane clown posse. Hey, chinless John Hawley, as my man Tariq Trotter, the great Black Thought, said, first ones to fall is cats with no chin. You switched your vote, didn't you, young Josh? Senator Hawley out of Missouri. You switched your vote this week, didn't you? You switched like you ran across that hall like the scared punk you are after pumping your equally tiny fist as you walked into the Capitol on January 6, 2021. You switched your vote, didn't you, young Josh Hawley, on whether or not the president of the United States has to come ask Congress if he is going to invade a country and engage in an act of war like your friend did in Venezuela a couple of weeks ago. But then you went and talked with your equally supplicant friend who wears his father's shoes, Marco Rubio, and Marco told you, we're not going back. And you said, I believe him. So you switched your vote to stop Bozo by saying, you got to come here first. But that's young Josh Hawley, Chinless John Hawley. Why do I bring up Chinless John Hawley? Chinless John and his members of the Insane Clown Posse, they also did not vote to convict Donald John Trump when you had the chance. After Jamie Raskin and their crew, after all of the United States Congress people got together and put the man on trial, y'all wouldn't convict him in the Senate. So young Josh, you had your chance to stop him. But guess what? The insane clown is back, and you part of the Insane Clown Posse. So I'm saying all that to say that you had a chance to stop him. Now that you can't stop him and he's scaring the ish out of y'all, you still won't stop him. But guess what? The United States of America exists in the world. And Anthony Mackie starred as Captain America in the Marvel movie Captain America: New World Order. But as it became clear that Bozo was not only dead, he was on the way back, Marvel changed the title from Captain America: New World Order to Captain America: Brave New World. Isn't it interesting how those two concepts, Brave New World, which is Stephen Miller has a fever dream where he thinks it's going to be a brave new world by taking us back to the brave old one, the runt rooster at the Department of Defense, Texas Crusader, thinks we're going to have a brave new world as we move back to the brave old world in his fantasy mind. Steve Bannon, who has now been talking ish in increased vigor about Ireland, thinking he can get the white nationalists to take over the Irish government. This is too news this week. Thinks it's going to be the brave new world. But guess what? No, you heard Mark Carney say new world. Oh yeah, order. You changed the title of a movie to try to make sure you don't piss nobody off. But what you can't stop is the dawn. So today we're beginning in the seeming dark before the dawn, because this is Steve Bannon, flood the zone with ish every day. I need some refuge. When's the game on? Can we just laugh and eat? Okay, yeah, y'all do what y'all do. Some of us gonna be on the wall. John Clarke's friend, Queen Mother Moore, Audley Moore, with her famous poem, Watchman, What's the Hour of the Night? The poem that John Clarke loved so much that he put it at the head of his volume of essays, Who Betrayed the African World Revolution. Somebody gotta be on the wall all the time. To quote the great Jimi Hendrix, all along the watchtower, princes kept their view. And all the maidens came and went, barefoot servants too, outside and in the cold distance, a wildcat did growl. Yeah, and the wind began to howl. Somebody got to stay on the watchtower. You looking at one of them. And I love to laugh. I laugh all the time. You can mix it all in, but let's be very clear. All along the Watchtower, somebody got to be on that wall. And it's because when, as Queen Mother Moore, they asked, what's the hour of the night? And as John Clark said, history's a clock. History clock is a clock that tells you your particular political time of day. It is a compass that tells you the latitude and longitude of world history. Somebody got to be able to read the clock. So it's very important for us to understand that in this moment, what seems to be the dark point, what Rayford Logan might have called the nadir a century plus ago in his book, The Betrayal of the Negro, or the nadir, is in fact the moment before the dawn. That's where we are right now. So we want to start with Mark Carney, not because Carney's a hero, not because Carney is somehow clairvoyant, not because Carney is a good guy. As John Clark said in some stories, it ain't no good guys, but because what we are watching is the end of a cycle of empire. We're going to talk a lot more about that in a moment. And we're at a moment when the U.S. led or U.S. centered global system, political system, economic system, financial system even, is unraveling faster than the myths that sustain it. And the Greeks ain't going to be able to help them, are they, Professor Dozier? Not going to be able to help you. I was looking at the people who blurbed the book too, and I have all the books that he blurred for the people who blurbed his books. And I understand you trying to prop up your worldview, but that ain't never coming back. At its peak, it was shaky. And now what's being revealed as the sun is coming up is that there is a new world order. It's not even the order that Mark Carney thinks is coming. But at that Canada summit in Beijing, his declaration that this is a next preparatory step toward that new world order, it was so clearly communicated that for a moment, it briefly pierced the commercial news, entertainment, mass media cycle. You know, people like Tony DeCopel and other thoroughly unqualified diversity, equity, inclusion hires in mass commercial news media here in the United States of America. It briefly pierced because he put it where you couldn't avoid it. He only gave you 3 words: new, world, order. You've heard that before. And then, of course, all the people who don't really read, but who know that phrase from a generation before because they live on TikTok or Instagram and they vaguely remember somebody talking about that. Then they dropped in Illuminati. My first question to everybody who says Illuminati is first spell it. And having spelled it, define it. And then I turn the volume down because I'm really not interested. But the whole point is that that phrase alone this week, what? Not because it was shocking alone, it was shocking, but because it affirmed what is becoming unavoidable. People talking about gas prices. Okay. Ask them boys in Texas, them oil company boys in Texas, whether they want all that heavy ass Venezuelan oil now in tankers heading toward, or in the tankers already in the Gulf of Mexico, not America. Where did that story go? Again, flooding the zone with ish. And they're set up to refine some of that stuff, a lot of that stuff. But then they're like, but if they do refine it and convert it into gas, where are they going to sell it? Well, some of it they're going to try to put in your tank so you can say, see, the prices come down. That's why I'm voting for Trump. These are the stupid people in your family. But a lot of it may end up in China anyway. Remember, China got contracts with Venezuela. Again, the more you know, the more you can see that much of the New World Order, the structure for it is already in place. It's critical to understand that. So, you know, this thing is being revised and potentially renegotiated. It's becoming unavoidable. The insane clown posse, Donald Trump and his crew, that administration accelerating assault on federalist governance, attacking states in the United States, attacking cities in the United States, all illegal, all going to court, much of it being blocked as we speak. But unfortunately, if there's of 100% of the conversations we're having, including too often in the spaces that aren't commercial news, entertainment, media, 90% or more of those conversations are focused on those things. Because as we talked about last week with the killing of Miss Good, you know, by Jonathan Ross, those things are shocking. Those things are unifying. Those things can trigger resistance in a way that can overwhelm the appearance of force But those things aren't the only things going on in the world, and everything is connected. So maybe those gas prices will come down a little bit, and somebody gonna be fooled by that. But we can't afford to be fooled anymore, because we are at a moment where this accelerating assault on the polity called United States, things that a lot of it was going to be thrown out of court, and some of it will be upheld in court. But the assault as well on international institutions is helping to expose the illusions of control that prop up both aspirational white supremacy. This white's never been supreme. Take that. Caller came in Sirius XM Urban View Mornings this week, said that, and I agree. I just think it's a lot to say to people who need things very simple, new world order. So white supremacy is not what I understand. I say nativism. I don't even say that. I say aspirational. No, the nativism is real, brother, but I'm not going to quibble with you. All right, fine. Aspirational white supremacy and global capitalism, which is real. Well, those things are being revised and potentially renegotiated in real time. The United States is cannibalizing its arrangements with the rest of the world. I'm talking about the government of the United States now through this increasingly absurdist white nativism. Stephen Miller is actually enjoyable when you understand how little impact he has in the world, as the light bulb filled with gravel or whatever it is in his bulb of a head that won't allow it to go straight, but has to go like this. And then he turns to and of course, the United States, we are far. Look at this little bubblehead clown, part of the insane clown posse, this increasingly absurdist white nativism and this greed-driven global destabilization. The Trump crime family, now riding the booster rocket of the insane clown posse, making deals everywhere. But these social structures are rapidly deteriorating. I'm sorry, footnote, Eric Adams, that your meme coin tanked because you thought somehow that you was part of the insane clown posse. But as every Negro who is in the insane clown posse certainly discovers at some point in their lives, your usefulness has evaporated with the loss of your political position, your elected position. But this week, we can be reminded by figures like Patrice Lumumba, of course, assassinated on this day. I think Baba Adesoji has read one of his speeches. Y'all can check that out if you put it in the Mbangis, y'all, in the on the YouTube side and on the Nubia side, will you please? And the reminders from Patrice Lumumba, who they had to get out to paint. We'll talk about him again in the context of Che Guevara and others in a minute. And Martin Luther King, of course, his birthday was the 15th. The holiday is Monday. The last day we'll kind of wrap up our Introduction to Africana Studies second iteration. We can recall from them that world orders do not announce themselves into existence. In fact, well, the first thing we can be reminded is that we are all connected as humans in the world. Those artificial nation state lines are just that, artificial. They have real impact in our lives, primarily through the diminished category of humanity called citizenship. It doesn't matter whether or not you're a citizen when somebody has assaulted you, someone has harmed you or killed you. And I refuse to lead any defense of my humanity with "I am a citizen," except in the immediate context of a danger that will enable me, having resisted it, to help other people. I reject the premise that citizenship should be an elevated standard of humanity. And for those who are anti-immigrant, I ask you a simple question. Why would you hate yourself? You're not an immigrant. If you're of African descent, you were drugged here, human trafficked. And if you were not drugged here, human trafficked, you inherit the status of those who were. The distinction between those who were human trafficked and those who were not of African descent is a distinction without, in most power arrangement formations, a difference. The controlling element of the difference between African people in a global capitalist system is the same controlling element for everybody else, class. When you start talking about racial capitalism, you find those distinctions don't completely evaporate, but they deteriorate to the point of really being a distinction without a difference. And we can talk more about that another time, but Dr. King would remind us that we are all connected. In fact, in Nubia, we read, of course, Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community, his book where he talks about universal basic income, where he talks about healthcare and housing, where he talks about the basic dignity of labor, and employment, all of those things. And where at the end of that book, he gives a full out plan on how to assault and attack all of those things in the United States and beyond, what he calls the world house, the whole world house. And he says that the funding for it is there if we get our asses out of Vietnam, if we get our asses out of Venezuela and Iran, if we stop sending billions to Israel. Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. King, yeah, very unpopular when he was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, including by many in the Black bourgeois, including many in the Black press, particularly on the war question. Confused Negroes, the ancestors of the confused Negroes of today. But the point is that Dr. King, we read Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos of Community. And if you go back and look through our compendia, our in class with Carr compendia, our working document, you can look at sessions 98 and 100, sessions 102. I was going back and look. That's where he was looking at particularly some of his global work. You can look at 163, Lewis Baldwin. We talked about the Arc of Truth, his work there. What Manner of Man, Lerone Bennett Jr.'s book, which was the first biography of Martin King published after he made transition. We talked about that in session 4. Again, in session 166, 168, and 175, Taylor Branch's volumes, Parting the Waters, Pillar of Fire, at Canaan's Edge, sessions 73, 98, 166. The Martin Luther King Papers, again, 166. This How SNCC Viewed Martin Luther King, session 201. We could go on and on and on, because we've talked about King a lot. I ain't talking about the Montgomery bus boycott and all that. Dr. King and Coretta Scott King, the memorial that was dedicated to them in Boston and the work around that, and their relationship as a result of their meeting and then courting and then getting married and then being together, him assassinated, her carrying on for decades, their shared work. Session 206. We could talk a lot about that. Nina Simone's tribute after he was assassinated, session 57. We could go on and on. Check the compendium, check the bibliography, check our massive archive of conversation. You'll see that, not just pause for there. But the book that I would recommend as we think about this coming on Monday is the compilation, excellent compilation, a series called The King Legacy, published out of Boston, Beacon Press. The book, In a Single Garment of Destiny, a Global Vision of Justice. You see it here? In a Single Garment of Legacy. Destiny, a Global Vision of Justice, The King Legacy. Martin Luther King, edited and introduced by the good brother Lewis Baldwin, many years at Vanderbilt University, and forward by the good sister Charlene Hunter Galt, the famous journalist, freedom fighter, intellectual warrior. Very important. Dr. King said this in an interview with Red Book magazine on the 5th of November, 1964. This is what Martin King said. This is the epigraph that frames the entire book. See there? This is what Dr. King said. He says, as we grow and come to see the oneness of mankind and the geographical oneness of the world, made possible by man's, of course, we know the pronoun, we say peoples. I'm a substitute man for people. Made possible by people's scientific and technological ingenuity. More and more, we are going to have to try to see our oneness in terms of brotherhood, sisterhood, people, community, what we might call our governance formations out of the ways of knowing of African people, the community, the source of our work. Dr. King says this does not mean that everyone has to agree at every point. Indeed, there can be a world government. Oh boy, hold on. Did you hear that? Yeah, that was the light bulb of Stephen Miller's head exploding. Because that's actually also Junior Varsity Vance, who went to Berlin last year and talked about the assault on European civilization. I'm sure that Professor Dozier wouldn't agree with Junior Varsity Vance, except that the fidelity to Greece and Rome as the intellectual foundation for the whole world, as Dr. King might say it. Unfortunately, King is a victim too, because when he talks about agape love and all that, he's going back to the Greek because he didn't know no Egyptian. He was aware of them when he wrote. In fact, if you read his thesis in Boston University, he talks about comparative religion, and he talks about Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the Greek names, of course, for Saret and Heru. So he's aware of it, but where would he have learned it? He couldn't have learned it from Buck Benny, Benjamin Mays, with Bates College, got the Greek, but not the meta-nature. That's why we have Mario Beatty like a metronome week after week, teaching meta-nature right alongside what we have with Sunyata Amin and Professor Narissa and Sam Reynolds, what we have with our brother Akil Parker, who's doing math. Your child got a math problem, you got a math problem, you need to come into Nubia because Akil is teaching you cold-blooded. Systematics, he calls it, brilliant mathematician, also a deep student of history. We are uncovering what needs to be uncovered for us to set our feet on that firm ground. So even King didn't have that when he was at Morehouse in the 40s, much less Crozier Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania, or Boston University, where he took the doctorate degree. Couldn't get it. But when he says here that there can be a world government, he's not talking about the Western world, junior varsity. Touch up your eyeliner. Don't let that mascara run when you start bawling as you realize the New World Order has always been here in one form. That's going to break your political back like the dust it is. And he's not, if we're reminded, remember we talked about Eric Schmidt a couple of months ago. Go look at the in-class conversation where we started with Schmidt, Senator Schmidt, a nasty member of the white nationalist crew and the insane clown posse, who stood in the District of Columbia right here at a conservative conference and said, if everybody's included, it's for nobody. Talking about the United States of America. Guess it, we're here, Senator, and you're not stupid. Go look at the birth rates. You're finished. It's done. Them babies are already here, and now they're right there at teenagers, early teens, from early teens down in terms of age, already a majority non-white. It's over. That's why y'all want to attack birthright citizenship, isn't it, you little bubblehead cretin, Mr. Stephen Miller? But it's over, baby. It's over. What's over isn't just your fever dream. What's over is the illusion that you were ever completely in charge. Your best shot of killing us was when we were being human trafficked. And as Malefi Asante always says, you ain't kill us then. It's over. We went through the worst of it. We have not been here before. We have been here before. We have not been here before. We have been here before, as Mary Baraka might call it. This is the changing sane. The hierarchy you want to continue doesn't exist anymore, even as its shadow, as its echo, as its extension, as what Carter Woodson might call today, in the 100th year anniversary of the formal founding of Negro History Week by the Association for the Study of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, African American Life and History, what Carter Woodson might call it, as he called it in Miseducation of the Negro when he's referring to Jim and Jane Crow, a sequel to slavery. The sequel may be here, but the arrangement through which you trafficked us is over. We broke that during the Civil War and gave you a chance to start something different, which you have fought like hell since the 1860s to stop. But guess what? We won't be stopped. Thought we told you that we won't stop. Dr. King isn't stopping at the borders of the United States of America either, as he says, finally, there can be a world government where diversity can exist, and this would lessen many tensions that we face today, and it would also enable everybody to understand that we are all clothed in a single garment of destiny. And whatever affects one nation directly in the world indirectly affects all. Martin Luther King Jr., Red Book Magazine, November the 5th, 1964. I was in my mama's stomach at the time, waiting to be born into this criminal enterprise. Who knew? Like everybody else here who dates back to being born around that time, that we'd be born into a world that we would live to see put in a position where we can do something about the indignities that our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents suffered. My parents were born into apartheid. Their parents were born into apartheid. Their parents were born into captivity. It wasn't that long ago. So what we're saying today in this New World Order, that you know, world orders do not announce themselves into existence. They are made. They are formed from resistance. And they are ultimately decided by the people who survive. Mark Carney didn't say that as an aspiration. He said it to say we took the first step. The step is taken. It looks bad. Looks like darkness, right? But this is where we advance. Look at when colonial people advance. We're going to talk about that. We're going to spend the rest of our little small time today talking about some of this stuff. And let's just go through these things right quick. It was interesting on Thursday evening over at Howard University. And if you all are in the, because I can't pull them up without risking an echo here. If I could, I would. We were together on the campus of Howard University for something called the, in fact, I might be able to, let me see if I can. Yeah, I think I did. I think I just did. Okay, that's good. If I can, I will. We were together. My friend Marie Johns, who is a former trustee emerita at Howard University, she put together, she's this year she's spending a year as the Gwen and Colbert King Endowed Chair of Public Policy. So she put together a conversation around education, and it's called Reimagining Public Education. She had asked Kaya Henderson, the former superintendent of DC Public Schools, my friend Kaya Henderson, who's now at the Aspen Institute, to give a talk. And Kaya said, yeah, I'm not going to give a talk, but I'll put together a panel of people. So she reached out to me. I was happy to do it, Kaya's a friend. So yeah, I'd be glad to do it because they plotting and planning. She also got one of her close sister friends and collaborators who's also working at the Aspen Institute, Janice Jackson, who some of you all may remember. She was the superintendent of schools for Chicago Public Schools. So it was Kaya and Janice and myself, the interim provost at Howard, Don Williams, Ivory Tolson, my good friend Ivory Tolson, who's the editor of the Journal of Negro Education. Y'all remember about a year and a half ago, I gave the Charles Thompson lecture for the Journal of Negro History at the Howard School of Education. I think they actually sent that link for the video, but I just put the link in the YouTube side. If you get to the Nubia side, y'all can put it in too. I'm sure you will. I know if Kemet is here, he will. He'd be on it all the time. Melanie Campbell, who is associate provost, who has the HBCU Center at Howard, because it's going to be a part 2 of the conversation. Melanie, so there are a lot of other people. Fandra Ndule, sister from Iswatini, who is a graduate student at Howard, and the good brother David Ogundulale, who is an undergrad at Howard, were student respondents to the conversation. And we talked about this question of reimagining public education. And I encourage all of y'all to really, to watch that. You go to Howard University's to Howard University's YouTube channel, and you'll see the King lecture series. You'll see my little face in the circle with everybody else who was there. And the reason I say I encourage you to do, because, one of the things these last half dozen years almost of us doing this weekly and then having Knarrative and Nubia and then just really expanding and having this foundation is that the things that we do in the periphery places, like the universities, like K-12 and all the other places, the freedom schools, the church schools, the after-school programs, the places where increasingly more and more people are drawing from our conversations, which I'm deeply grateful for and feel just a continuing expanded responsibility to get even better and to be much more connected. Well, we talked about some of that on Thursday night. And the conversation we had, the panel conversation we had, was only about 40, 45 minutes. And then the students responded, and Ivory responded, Dawn responded, and then we threw it up for question and answer and conversation. So the whole thing didn't take maybe an hour, 15 minutes. But it was important for me because, when Kaya asked me the first question, we sitting there, the three of us sitting there, and Kaya says, so Dr. Carr, has public education ever worked for our people? And I said, absolutely. It worked in Kemet, Timbuktu, and Gal. It worked in Southern Africa. It worked on those boats as we were being trafficked and figured out ways to create out of the thing that we had the foundation for. It worked on the plantations and the places we were trafficked. It worked in the early days of apartheid as we had our institutions that we were building literally, not at scale, but in those places, it absolutely worked. I said, we went off the rails during integration. when our teaching force was decimated, as Leslie Fenwick has written in her book, Jim Crow's Pink Slip. We went off the rails when our governance formations were assaulted by a social structure that understood that they needed to educate us in a way for service and servitude. And I said, it will be restored. Then we got into the conversation. We just took off from there. I think it was brilliant. Janice was, man, everybody was hitting on all cylinders, really. So I encourage y'all to really go back and go and look at that conversation, because at the end of the day, the solution is us. And us means the community. And as I said on Thursday night, the university, I said HBCUs are black-based HWCUs. And I love HBCUs. I've spent my whole career at them. I went to one, repping today, Mississippi Valley. Shout out to the Delta Devils. I ain't mad at y'all. I'm saying we're all one. It's one HBCU, and it's global. It's the universities in the Caribbean and Latin America. It's the universities in Africa, and it's the black students and all the white formations. But it is the community that is the center. And then we expand out and just source from those places elements of things we need. But if we just go to those places and live, we have not made the advance we need to make. This is a new world order. And for us, it is a renewed world order, as we remember the community is the source of our authority. So that is an important conversation. We can and must make the distinction between governance, who we are to each other, and social structure, who we are to other people, and what is the milieu in which we work. This is the 250th anniversary of the break from the 13 colonies of the criminal enterprise called United States of America, now from England, and the commingling of that criminal enterprise with former French colonies, Spanish colonies, Dutch colonies. Because remember, you talk about the Danes, the Danish. Remember that when the United States was negotiating during and after World War II to perhaps even buy, under Harry Truman, Greenland, Holland sold the Virgin Islands, what we call the U.S. Virgin Islands, Danish version. It came from the Danes, but they didn't sell Greenland. Even as that, they're going to pump millions of dollars into that little lonely ass outpost. But they signed a treaty, I think it was 1951. They signed a treaty where they said, you can have as many or very many military bases. And it's important. But anyway, I'm raising all that to say that this is the 250th anniversary of their criminal enterprise, 1776 to 2026. But it's also the 100th anniversary of Negro History Week. So we're engaged now in an intellectual war over memory. Go back to 1976. I know that Baba Kwaku, Brother Larry Crow, is usually here. He's in Nubia all the time, him and Mama Olabisi. And I know y'all are standard bearers. And if you're in here, Baba, if you're in the Nubia side or the YouTube side, depending on whether you're traveling, because Larry is the greatest living interlocutor to our memory in the United States. He is the absolute greatest. He has talked to more people. He has sat with them. He is the lead, the senior interviewer in many ways with Sister Juliana Richardson and the History Makers out of Chicago. And Larry is our living memory. Larry remembers 1976 because right down the road from him and Mama Olabisi right now is the National Afro-American Museum and Cultural Center. 1976 is when it came into existence. That museum, just like the museum in Philadelphia, in downtown Philly, the African American Museum in Philadelphia, were founded in 1976. My man Charles Blockson used to always tell me that story because they were talking about having his collection as part of that museum. And he was a long time, not only supporter of, but a vital pillar for that museum before he made his transition a couple of years ago. Those museums were founded in 1976 for the specific purpose of centering our memory. A story that reaches us this week from this city. My good friend Lonnie Bunch, my man. Well, not my good friend, I know him, but he knows everybody. Newark's own, Brick City's own, Lonnie Bunch, the Secretary of the Smithsonian. What did Dr. Bunch do? I'm turning over these records of where we anticipate the exhibits will be, along with photographs, what we're doing for this year, so you can send it to your various spokesmodels, cretins, and other assorted non-qualified DEI applicants and awardees, so you can review all the stuff that's going to be in the Smithsonian Museums for 2026 and make some decisions of whether it aligns with your ideology. He didn't say all that. He's just giving over the stuff, right? Because Lonnie Bunch is a class act all the way through. But the insane clown posse is now combing through what's going to be put up in the museums to determine if it's okay. By the way, since I'm mentioning that, on the 16th of this month, on Friday the 16th, an exhibit on historically Black colleges and universities opened in the temporary gallery at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Not sure how long it's going to be there. I was down there a couple of weeks ago, and the brothers were telling me that it was supposed to go up in October. And of course, the government shutdown hit. We'll talk more about that in a moment. But they have a companion volume, small companion volume. My good friend, now this is my man, Jelani Favors, now vice president doing research at the United Negro College Fund. And thanks again, Jelani. His mom recently made transition. I'll ring the bell for her. And while he was in the hospital with her, he agreed to sit with, I didn't know his mom was sick. When I reached out to him, he told me, "Oh man, well, we'll do this." He said, no, I want to. It'll be a good thing. And so, we said a kind of a collective prayer there before he met with our Black university students virtually, talk about his work. He is the one who wrote the incredible book, Shelter in a Time of Storm, on HBCU. Jelani has an essay in this volume called Doing Battle Where We Stand, Student-Led Activism and Radical Reform, one of the essays in the collection At the Vanguard, Making and Saving History at Historically Black Colleges and Universities. This exhibit just opened at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, just opened on Friday, January 16th. And you see the table of contents there. See, these are the kind of Black people you can't defeat. Hey man, Stephen Miller, on the best day of your little bubblehead life, you can't deal with this sister right here. You can't deal with none of us. You got a better chance dealing with me. What you don't want to do is piss a sister like that off, right? So anyway, I just wanted to mention that because that one's up and that one's out. But Lonnie Bunt sent a bunch of stuff over this week to Bozo and his insane clown posse as if they can read or write. But in this process, we're in the 250th anniversary of 1776. The founding of the criminal enterprise, or at least the break of the criminal enterprise. By the way, if you read the Declaration of Independence and ask yourself how many of those things that Jefferson and that crew accused George III of has Donald Trump done in the last 8 months, put troops among us, taxation without representation, all this stuff. When you look at it, it's about 40 of them, 42 or 43 of them. Trump has done all but like 4 or 5 of those things. I guess that might be enough. I think Tom Jefferson, relieved of having to do physical labor by the people of African descent he had trafficked, and at least one woman who he constantly violated sexually. I think Thomas Jefferson might say it's time for a revolution. In fact, I know he would. You got to read what he wrote, but read the Declaration and see how many of them things Trump did. So y'all ain't serious about having no United States of America based on freedom and democracy and all that stuff that, you've hijacked, as Professor Dozier would say, for your white supremacist agenda. But this is the 200th anniversary. Okay, that's a social structure thing. But governance for us is the 100th anniversary of Negro History Week. And of course, I'll be down in South Carolina at the end of this month, the 30th, 31st of January. And then on the 1st of February, we're going to bring in the 100th anniversary of Negro history, formal anniversary. Jelani's working on something, I think now. He told us he's writing. Can't wait for that to come up. So I'm going to say less about that now until it comes out. But when it comes out, we're going to talk about it a lot around Carter G. Woodson and Negro History Week. But we're going to celebrate. And we are going to get deep into this conversation. So as we think about this, we have to begin to understand that this criminal enterprise that came into existence in 1776, the world order that it put in, the world order that we're going to be studying deeply with our friend Howard French and his book, Born in Blackness. This criminal enterprise, a global world system that was literally born in blackness. We should remember that this empire isn't just about the United States. It's about that European world order. There's an interesting book that was just published. Somebody was asking me about Gabriel Rockhill in office hours on Monday, and I was going so fast, I actually showed the book and didn't connect the author of the book with the book, because I said, yeah, I'm aware of Gabriel Rockhill. I haven't read him yet. And I hadn't. I just started reading this book, Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism. This is Gabriel Rockhill. Seen some interviews with him, The Intellectual World War. This guy is very interesting. He's a professor at Villanova, right up the street in Philly, not too far from where I used to live in West Philly. He's over there in Villanova on the main line. But he opens this book with the murder of, as I was talking about, Patrice Lumumba, the murder of Che Guevara, the opening salvo of what he calls the Intellectual World War. He quotes Fidel Castro at the beginning, who says, ideas are not only an instrument to create consciousness so that people fight, but ideas have become the main instrument of struggle, not an inspiration, not a guide, not an orientation, but the main instrument of struggle. Dr. King's successes begin and end in many ways with his ideas. And his ideas are not just his ideas. They aren't even just the ideas of Mahatma K. Gandhi. They are the ideas of his wife, who was into nonviolence and pacifism before him. They're the ideas of Bayard Rustin. They are the ideas of Sue Bailey Thurman and her husband, Howard Thurman. They are the ideas of Mordecai Wyatt Johnson and his wife. They are the ideas of his father and mother and their parents and their parents. King represents a genealogy. And it's a genealogy of ideas laid back of struggle. But he begins this book, he begins that section, the opening salvo of the intellectual world war, with a quote from Thomas Sankara after Fidel Castro, Burkina Faso. Shout out to Burkina Faso. And in a small footnote, shout out to Burkina Faso women's soccer team, who are one of the 16 teams who made the Africa Cup of Nations for women, which begins in March. I think in Morocco they're going to have it. But at any rate, Burkina Faso is on the field as well, with Ghana and Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire and a bunch of other, Tanzania, a bunch of other. So shout out to y'all. But Thomas Sankara writes about Che. He says the bullets were aimed at much more than Che's spirit. Braccio writes they wanted his head. A worldwide manhunt, sparing no cost, was launched to track him down. The masters of empire and their minions needed the head of the man who was outsmarting them, who openly stated his ambition to spark 2, 3, or many Vietnams. Too much damage had already been done in the Caribbean as well as in Africa, and South America was next. They did not understand this task in metaphorical terms. Apparently, they literally wanted him decapitated so that his head could be placed in a jar and expedited to Washington as a war trophy. We're going to talk about trophies in a minute, but this idea of engaging in intellectual work and thinking, that's at the center of our work. I'm loving that we are in 2026, because it gives people a renewed element of focus to say, oh, 250th anniversary of the United States, now 100th anniversary of Negro History Week, let's get down. Intellectual warfare, as Jacob Carruthers would say. Shout out, by the way, save the second weekend in February, the Jacob Carruthers Conference, annually held in Chicago. I'll be presenting there. I'm a proud member of the Committee Institute, happy to be in that formation as well. But the point of study now is to revive the understanding and shift the grounding and focus of what we're doing out of our governance formations, our ways of knowing, our movement and memory. On Friday, on Urban View Mornings, shout out to our sister, Mother Virginia Muhammad in Boston, who called in. Sorry we kept you on for over an hour. She was sitting in her car. She said she dropped off her great grandbaby at school and was listening to us have a conversation. And she quoted a brother she said she learned this from. And I asked if she knew Eugene Walcott, because she's in her 80s. She said, oh yeah, I know him. I know she know him because Eugene Walcott is now known as Louis Farrakhan, and he was in Boston along with Mother Virginia, who was raised there in Roxbury. As I asked her, of course, so she probably knew Malcolm X, who was fishing for men and got Walcott, and now, of course, that's Louis Farrakhan. He said the minister, she said on Friday, she said the minister has a saying, says the diameter of your knowledge determines the circumference of your activity. So this intellectual work that we're doing increases the diameter of our knowledge, and that will determine the circumference of our activity. I know all this studying, but what we going to do? Mother Virginia just helped us understand. Thank you, Mama Virginia. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you. Thank you for that lesson. So she got to call back. We got to continue being in conversation with her. And it's important to understand that that's Allah's mathematics, who, according to the Wu, is higher than knowledge. But at any rate, it's important to understand that what a framing moment for us to think about the question of ideas. By the way, y'all smash that like button and all that stuff on the YouTube side. And of course, come on, join Knarrative in Nubia, because I'm telling you, we got the grounding now. We had a couple of thousand people on Monday night in office hours having this conversation. And in a moment, I'm going to return to it in a minute. But, you know, this strategy that Bozo is engaged in now with his insane clown posse, what Gerald said, going from America first to America's first, what Nikhil Pal Singh wrote an excellent essay this week called Homeland Empire. Y'all look that up, Homeland Empire. If I can find it quickly, I'll drop that in. It's on a website called equator.org. He says, from Venezuela to Minnesota, Trump is creating a homeland empire. He wants to expand to the hemisphere. You ain't got that kind of muscle, Bo. Then you do have nuclear launch codes, and that should be terrifying to all of us. But let's be very clear, Bozo. The people are pushing back everywhere. And there's a reason you didn't get rid of Delcy Rodriguez down in Venezuela, because you want them people still in charge. You got to run the country. I don't care how many times somebody come give you a Nobel medal. Shit don't mean nothing. We're going to talk about that in a minute too. But you sent George Jetson down there, John Gillespie, your head of your CIA. He looked just like George Jetson in my face. And then them sad sack looking guys, all in the insane clown posse. The head of the CIA was down in Venezuela in Caracas this week, meeting with the president of Venezuela. While you got the president of Venezuela and his wife locked up in Brooklyn. You just want what you want. And Nikhil Pal Singh, Professor Singh walks through this beautifully. He's trying to build a homeland empire. Alfred McCoy has an excellent book that I would recommend that just came out called Cold War on 5 Continents, A Global History of Empire and Espionage. This is Alfred McCoy's book, Professor McCoy, who is at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He wrote a book called The Politics of Heroin. I'm going to summarize some of the things Professor McCoy says here. In fact, I'm just going to draw your attention to one of the things. He says, empires are determined by dominating energy sources. Watch this. Again, introduction, front matter, back matter on the 26th in Nubia. We start with Born in Blackness. This whole book traces in many ways the first of the 4 energy sources that modern empires, the modern world order, the modern social structure was able to tap into. Born in Blackness, Africa, Africans, and the Making of the Modern World, 1471 to the Second World War, Howard Waring French does a great job in here, principally chronicling the first of those 4. Europe rose as a concept and as a global force on the back of captive labor. Labor as the energy source. That would be us. And everybody else, they were able to colonize. Energy was the first of those sources. This is what Professor McCoy is saying in this book, Cold War on 5 Continents. He says the second source, coming from a subcategory of the Europeans, the British, the English, was coal power, C-O-A-L. Not soul power, but coal power. Sorry, James Brown. Coal power. The coal power funds the powers the Industrial Revolution. Going back to them days of Oliver Twist and David Copperfield. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. More grills, sir. What about the poor? What about the poor? Said Scrooge. Because you busting their ass. The engine of it. Now, Bozo trying to drag you back to the coal era. Them days is gone. But the second of the 4 is coal power. Then he says the United States taking the baton from old Europe and England during and after World War II is oil power. I was saying nuclear, but oil power. Oil power. Them days gone too, Bo. Because what Professor McCoy says, we are now in the moment of a new world order, and it's going to be powered. And he uses China as one of the, if not the main example, the Green Revolution. Green power. Did you see the judge in Virginia, the federal judge in Virginia, stop Bozo from stopping the wind projects in Virginia this week? The injunction. Now we'll see ultimately what the MAGA 6 on the Supreme Court do. But all y'all are doing is unilaterally disarming. Oh, it's a beautiful thing. You're destroying the United States' capacity to wreak havoc in the world, decision by decision, led by a clown and his insane clown posse. The courts are showing some nominal resistance. There's a great article in the New York Times beginning of the week to talk about the Trump-appointed judges and how they have been ruling primarily for Trump, overwhelmingly for Trump in terms of raw number. When you disaggregate them and put them on the district court bench and on the appeals court bench, what you'll see is that these judges are not standing with Bozo. Not completely. You gotta look at the age too, but these weeks, in a week where we mark the transition of course, Claudette Colvin, Booker T. Washington High School in Montgomery, Alabama, the great Claudette Colvin, who after her transition, people are finding out more and more people about her. Here's a little obituary from the New York Times. Claudette Colvin, 86, whose bus arrest preceded Rosa Parks dies. We talked about her. Just wanted to mention her again, of course. Last week, I wanted to mention and didn't clean it up at the end. Of course, our sister, about a decade younger, a little over a decade younger than Claudette Colvin, Lydia Blackman Lowry, one of the youngest Selma marchers who made transition at age 75. A beautiful spirit, did their work. Very important. This notion of resistance, this question of movement and memory as we remember those who sacrificed for us, connected to the longer genealogy of Africans going back to the origin of humanity. This gives us another form of power, another dominating energy source that goes back to the original dominating energy force that, as Howard traces in Born in Blackness, allows us to understand how this thing came into being. We're taking our peoplehood back. What did we hear from Mother Virginia? The diameter of your knowledge determines the circumference of your activity. When you change your mind, you can change your physical actions. Free your mind, as George Clinton might say, and the rest will follow. The rest, your ass. Enough. But think about that. In this world order, and then we'll kind of begin to wrap up for the day, the world order is remaking itself. This Canadian shot across the bow. Read Ed Luce. I read this whole op-ed on the air on Urban View Morning, I think on Wednesday, because from the Financial Times, because it's my obligation to thank Professor Hunter for having the vision to say these spaces we have must be synergized. I'm for everybody out there doing what they're doing. I'm for Joy Reid. I'm for Native Land Pod. Shout out to my girl Tiffany Cross, who left Native Land Pod. She's doing her own thing. She got a new book coming out shortly. She was on Roland Martin. You know, I'm for 10 Toes Down for the Black Star Network. I was there before it was started, and I'm riding with Roland as well. You know, he were on conversation at his studio 2 blocks from the White House the other day. I mean, and here, Narrative in Nubia, Professor Hunter having the vision to say we got to have something completely distinct, completely separate, owned by, for us, powered by us, with nickels and dimes that allowed the creation of a staff to keep the website going as Narrative emerged in Nubia, to have the questions answered, to be able to convene and all the other things. Basecamp, shout out to Basecamp and everybody who was able to put that together. And the first meeting was last week and it continues now. All the reading groups, shout out to Brother Jelani and Brother Asabi, of course, Marlon and everyone else who is doing those work now. And now we got a place where our brother, Kevin Powell, can screen his new documentary and be in conversation, and we got to worry about nothing. All of that powered by us. That energy source is us. We're going back to the energy source that got us in this mess in the first place, as we were trafficked because we didn't think people would do that kind of thing. But we're going to walk through it chapter and verse with Howard French to see how it happened and how we have resisted. But that order, as Ed Luce writes about this week, how to de-risk from the United States, because, you know, when you ask me, say, well, can you come on Review Morning? Sure. You do a couple of days a week. I'd be happy to do it. Several days a week. I'm happy to do it. Not only I'm happy, I feel responsibility because Joe Madison held that down for so long, and then he makes transition. And so, you know, you got us, you got Bree and Clay, and you got, you know, I mean, it's just important to see. And then on the weekends, you know, Lou Hutt's doing something live down there now, Sirius XM building. And of course, you know, Wilma Leon, so many others, Reese, Colbert. And so if I'm there, I'm going to do what I can do to the best of my ability. And one of the things I'm going to do, because, you know, I'm going to read every morning, every day, every night, all the time, this essay from Edward Luce in the Financial Times, How to De-risk from the United States. I read Ed Luce's op-ed. It's very interesting. He says, the world until recently believed the United States-China decoupling was on the way. It turns out that most countries are now scrambling to de-risk from America. This is the conservative paper for the finance boards in the world. Not the Wall Street Journal, not in the same way. As Jay Powell, Federal Reserve Chair on Denmark, one of America's most loyal allies, can attest. Pacifying Donald Trump only gets you so far. Yeah, Jay Powell slapped him around, didn't he, this week? It buys time, but is no substitute for having protection against a rogue superpower. We are thus in the early stages of an accelerating process of U.S. de-risking. Social distancing from the world's hegemon is a painful business, especially if you're an ally. He says, yet America's friends are those most urgently in need of it. Their place in the sun rested on the world America made. The jolt to European and Asian allies is thus correspondingly greater. But America's reputation of the, quote, liberal international order, end quote, is also a shock, although in many ways a pleasant one, to China, its chief adversary's new world order. China is now auditioning to be the main provider of global public goods, including stability. As world leaders converge on Davos, most of the chatter is about coping with Trump, who is bringing half his cabinet. Bo, you scared now, ain't you, Bo? Yeah, a quieter China will be there to pick up the pieces. In that respect, today is zero sum. A loss to America is a gain for China. Countries in Canada, in America's hemisphere, including Canada, are moving closer to Beijing. And he talks about Carney going over there. This is before he said New World Order. The deal with Mercosur, which is the Latin America bloc with Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay. Europe has concluded that deal. Britain trying to get back with Europe in a different way, not immediately through joining the EU, but by softening the Brexit. All of that stuff. He's talking about the dollar, how the dollar is falling. Somebody called in and said it's lost 20% of its value since the end of the fall in Mexico. Very interesting. Gold is up 70% since Trump took office last year. The reserve currencies are changing. We talked on the air on Sirius XM, and I'm talking now, just mentioning in passing, the alternative payment systems that are being set up. BRICS, you know who's also a member of the BRICS? Iran. There's a reason Bibi, the international killer, and the Israeli government, who continues its form of extermination. One of the things by invading Venezuela, it's taken the heat off of Israel as it continues to kill the Gazans, the Palestinians. Bibi got on the phone and said, don't invade Iran. His lord and master, that would be Donald John Trump, Vladimir Putin, do not invade Iran. Why? Because, hey, we got a problem. Remember, the Israelis recognize Somaliland. And what did the Chinese say? This is some bullshit, because Somaliland is not a country, and you're recognizing them for the same reason y'all interfering in Taiwan. Somaliland, like Taiwan, we do not recognize Somalia. You know who was in Mogadishu this week? The Chinese foreign minister, who invited Somali president to China for the China Arab Summit. Oh, BB called Donald Trump, say, man, don't bomb Iran. We got a problem, because remember, who are they saying is the proxy for Iran in that region? The Houthis in Yemen. Remember, as they were killing the Palestinians, and the Houthis was closing off that gap in the Red Sea that allows the trade to go through there and through the Suez and the Mediterranean? Two things. Number one, maybe close to a third of global trade coming through on ships that come through there. And you got, listen, Israel's like, we don't have a grip on this now. And China's getting off the bench like, now we with the Somalis. Y'all need to stop playing with us. And Iran is in the BRICS. And guess what? They're having exercises, naval exercises off the coast of South Africa. Yeah, Cyril Ramaphosa can come to the White House, and Bozo and JD Vance with that racist ass Elon Musk can be glaring at him on the couch, and they talking smack. But guess what? South Africa in the Cape of Good Hope, that's where the stuff gonna have to go if they shut off the Red Sea. We are on the verge of a new world order, and they are negotiating a way to pay each other in bilateral trade and in block trade that doesn't involve the US dollar. They call it the BRICS bridge. That's only one of the ways. It's not robust enough now to take it over, but the fact that it exists and they're working feverishly on it, and that Bozo is tearing up all the rules. Ain't no rules. We don't need your stinking rules. We ain't got to show you shit. Whether it be a passport from me to some funky ass hyped up ICE guard, or somebody doing a transaction nation to nation that don't involve the dollar. Oh, there's a new world order on the verge of being born. This is a very important thing. The Trump, with these tariffs, if the Supreme Court comes down on his side, this is a problem for the United States of America. Y'all don't listen to Bozo. The Trump crime family is enriching itself. Did y'all see this week? Intel, they want to put a 25% tariff on global companies, but they telling Intel, if you give up a quarter of your profits to the U.S. government, you think it's coming to the U.S. government, or you think it's coming to the Trump crime family? Very important. 25% tariff on chips. Bozo is in there stealing with both hands, and the insane clown posse, with a variety of different and often competing interests, is at each other's throats, but they're using him for whatever they think they want. But what they're really doing is weakening that order that began with that first source of energy for the modern world system, which was us being trafficked. It's coming to an end. China was in Somalia this week. Wang Yi, who is the Chinese foreign minister. Come on. Come on. You see Bozo now trying to stick his nose into the Ethiopia-Egypt conflict over the water. Every time we go to Egypt, we hear about that, get some updates. But guess what? Now Bozo trying to stick his nose in that. Why? I want that Nobel Prize. Whatever. At the end of the day, you understand, because you're being briefed and told by people who know better, that region isn't under your thumb, and China is all over that stuff. It's very important to understand these maneuvers. Bozo didn't bomb Iran, even though the son of the Shah of Iran is now in all the newspapers talking about he knows best for Iran and he can come back from exile and govern. You can't put him in there now. The people in Iran want better. But this word that I've been saying over and over again, we have to understand sanctions. Sanctions is what weakened Venezuela. Sanctions is what weakened Iran. Forget the other players and the politics for a moment. Understand that people are in the streets because they're hungry. People are in the streets because they are being oppressed. People are in the streets like they're in the streets anywhere because this thing has gotten terrible for them. But the main reason things have gotten terrible isn't just the domestic leadership, the domestic government, the domestic people in charge, whether it be purebred thugs or ideologues, whether it be theocrats. It isn't just that. It's the sanctions that your tax dollars had put into place under Democrats and Republicans, except now you got an insane clown who thinks he's going to wield tariffs like a cudgel, who has torn up all the rules. And at this point, whether Iran gets a new government or not, you think they're going to put the son of the Shah of Iran back in as the leader and the people in the street now just going to take it? It's beyond your capacity control. You think George Jetson, you can go down to Caracas and ensure something there, Mr. Gillespie, Mr. John Gillespie, meeting with Delcy Rodriguez? No, because there are forces at play now that are larger than your ability to control. And do you think Maria Machado, that giving up that little piece of metal that you got in Norway, in Oslo, to Bozo is going to help you? Y'all know what? That ain't even the first time that a Nobel Prize been given to a Nazi, to a white supremacist. Knut Hassman, K-N-U-T. Knut, first name, K-N-U-T. H-A-M-S-U-N, Hamsun. Knut Hamsun in 1943 gave up his Nobel, which he won for literature. He was a novelist. He was a Norwegian novelist, Norway of all people. Norwegian novelist Knut Hamsun won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1920. And in 1943, with the war waging, he mailed it after having a wonderful, in his description, meeting. He mailed it to the Nazi chief of propaganda, Joseph Goebbels. He mailed it to Goebbels, you know, the Stephen Miller of the Nazis. He gave it to him, and people have sold their medals. Did you know that John Nash, the one played by Russell Crowe in the movie A Beautiful Mind, that his trust after he passed auctioned off his Nobel medal for $735,000 in 2019, and they gave it to the Nash Trust. I think he was dead. Y'all can check it out. But we put too much stock in those awards. Them awards don't mean nothing. It's like people crying out about these Golden Globes, and some people gonna cry about the Academy Awards. I feel sorry for you. God bless Tiana Taylor, but that one battle after another, please. Yeah, I know Center's about to take an L. Those awards are all about L's. I don't care whether it's a Nobel or Oscar. All of that. The minute you take the power away from this system to reinforce their myths is the day you will be free. Get that circumference straight. Get that circumference straight. So please understand. Please understand what we're talking about. With this week, we'll talk to Congressman Benny Thompson out of Mississippi, because the people now are pushing back, challenging Minnesota in court about these ICE foods. A half dozen of the 12 appropriation bills that will keep the government open have already been passed. They got 2 more that have been approved this week by the House of Representatives, bringing the total to 8 if they get passed by the Senate and on to Bozo's desk. That will mean that over 3/4 of the government will remain open. They've already passed agriculture, commerce, energy, interior, justice, but you know where they stuck. And this is what Congressman Thompson told me when I asked him directly Thursday morning on the air, Sirius XM, about this ICE and DHS budget, because so far Schumer in the Senate and Jeffries in the Congress, to quote you, Sister Lurie, Daniel Favors, what the F, having said they're going to shut the thing down if you don't defund or severely restrict that price. Benny Thompson said, I'm for that. In fact, he was going into a meeting at 9:30 that morning. That's about 8:45 Thursday morning, for those of you who are listening. He says, I'm going into a meeting at 9:30 about this very thing. They have not decided yet. Meanwhile, because they fighting, some of the Democrats are like, nah, you got to shrink this budget. Some of them want to eliminate it completely. I'm one of them people, but hey, I'm not in office, but that's why I got to vote and get the right people in. But meanwhile, they have restored funding to a great deal number of things. Y'all already Voice of America, NIH, all this, they're restoring funding because guess what? They realize they about to lose power. Bozo and the insane clown posse ain't got that kind of muscle. That power has peaked, and the things that he is doing is scaring the ish out of these people. So they're starting to put the millions back. But it may be too late. Harvard dropped to number 3 in the university rankings, the global world university rankings. If you read Times Higher Education this week, above them, Chinese universities, below them, Chinese universities filling up the top 10, 15, 20. Just please understand what's going on. But all of this noise, Bozo giving out pardons to his friends, Bozo's rhetoric, propaganda Barbie's rhetoric, all this stuff is the zone with ish. Robert Francis Kennedy Jr. telling you to drink raw milk and got an inverted pyramid with meat at the top. All this stuff. Denying visas to 75 countries. Don't come here for the World Cup. And if you are the president of Colombia, Piero, do not come here for no meeting because they're going to arrest you, man. I don't even know if the UN leaders are going to keep coming in September. This is a problem. It's designed to numb us, to have us look away in search of refuge or distraction from the storm, to deny reality or simply repeat it'll be okay or it's not that bad. Understand that our viewing numbers the last several weeks here and in class have surged. Tell your friends, come, like, share, subscribe. Join Knarrative, join Nubia. The numbers are surging and they were always at a consistent level and now they're just going up. Why? People are tired, but people want to understand, because understand when you change your thinking and you get that information, you change your actions, your other actions. We must be reinsured in the refuge of our governance formations. At the same time that we organize and mobilize to fight in the social structure formations. This is a lesson of Martin Luther King. King was in an African church, in an African political and social formation. And from that, he worked as allies with other human beings to create that world house he wanted to live in. The compliant press couldn't stop him. The we're better than that people couldn't stop him. The fact is that institutions can even be stronger than that. The appropriations bills being passed, Benny Thompson and them fighting to get this thing undermined. Lauren Underwood, Congresswoman Lauren Underwood, getting her bill passed to restore those subsidies, even as Obamacare subsidies are not restored and as people are dropping out. This is going to be a problem, but now is the time to attack and go forward. They're breaking all the rules. Please understand. At the university front, y'all saw Abigail Spanberger becomes the governor of Virginia. Guess what? You had several members of the University of Virginia board quit this week. The MAGA people quit. They see the writing on the wall. So too, people on the board of George Mason University. Even as, remember the brother who was the president of George Mason, they wanted to run him out like they ran out the UVA. When you won that election, I don't care that Abigail Spanberger is not Zoran Mamdani. You see the consequences. Elections have consequences. I got to check with my sister now, Claudrina Harrell, down there at the UVA and see what's on the ground, Drina. What's going on? One of the most brilliant scholars we know, working class sister, swing with both fists, just a beautiful spirit, and just number one, just an incredible intellect and commitment to our people. Is UVA going to be better for her, for those children who come there, particularly those Black children who take her classes by the hundreds every semester? This clock is ticking toward the midterms, but the things are already changing. In the courts, blocking ICE, messing with people in Minnesota. The Department of Education backed up all for clawing back those student loans with wage garnishments. Why? Hey, man, Bozo and his insane clown posse are going to make it hard for us. Please understand. Please understand. I want to end today for about an hour and a half, just a little over. So I want to end today by saying that we know how to end this mess. Through generosity, through solidarity, through focusing, through using language as a way of knowing. There's an interesting book that just came out as an aside in terms of ways of knowing. Languages are ways of knowing. There's a new book called Learn Black American Sign Language. I picked this up, Franklin Jones Jr. I saw it at the museum when I was down there. And they got like all the different ways. You know, African people got our own way of talking in sign language. How to refer to family and friends, for example, friend, a different word. This is like African ASL. I'm loving it. I got to read this and study it and think about how it relates to the spoken versions of Ebonics. Very important to understand. We're using these platforms to talk about our science and technology to create that multipolar world we want to use. We are as reliable as the sunrise, here every week, We're joining many other reliable spaces, and we're stepping up our notion. So we'll see everybody. Sunyata and I are going to be down at Sankofa today from 1 to 3. Sankofa provides the teas for, Calabash provides the teas for Sankofa. Then we're talking about Marcus Garvey. We're talking about Harriet Tubman, and we're talking about the Black Panthers and Sada Shakur as well. And Sunyata has curated teas and books to be together. So it's going to be interesting as we talk about that. So we've got a couple more weeks before Blackest History Month. We're about to set it off, Prof. We're about to set it off.
And Dr. Sunyata also supplies the teas for our health, our collective health.
Yeah.
Them teas.
Yes.
But let me tell you, I don't know what she does, but they absolutely do everything that the package says. It's incredible. She's incredible. So that's calabashtea.com, calabashtea.com. And if you're in Nubia and you're just trying to kick around, Sundays, you're going to get wellness and wisdom, alternating with Dr. Sunyata, who is in Maroon's Medicine Chest, leading us to our best health, which we need. We need this while we're fighting. We need to be okay. So thank you. And I was thinking when I was sitting there listening to Dr. Black deliver one of the best speeches I've ever heard, that everybody comes through you. That's your introduction. Dr. Sunyata is your introduction.
Who, me?
You are the
no.
you are the center of the things that
no.
lead us to
I get to be the person who reminds us all of who we are to each other. One of the people, and I'm grateful for that. When you say that to me, you talking to my parents, you talking to Jamie McDonald Williams and Charles Blockson and John Henry Clark and Jacob Carruthers, and that's who you. So when you say that to me, that's my encouragement from them and from everyone to say, I just got to now work that much better.
I bring it up because a lot of us tend to be very selfish with our relationships, and people, we run to these cliques. This country of cliques, country of tribes, and that's how we got last time. So, to make those connections with people, I think is not just the generosity of your spirit, but the way forward, right? It's not, you don't own and control people's boundaries. You share them so that everybody can get this knowledge. And hold that book up again, please, the sign language book, because I want to invite this gentleman on to the radio shoot. Who is this?
Let me see. This is here he is. This is Brother Franklin Jones Jr. Learn Black American Sign Language, a history and complete beginner's guide with over 200 words and phrases. Let's see here. Look. Now look here. All right. You see this right here? You see that? Y'all see that picture right there? Y'all see them walking in front of that? I will read this. He says, as I look back on my life, I am grateful for how I learned sign language. I lost my hearing at the age of 5 and struggled with the English language. I attended a quote unquote regular public school, that is a school for hearing students, from the 1st to the 7th grades, and spoke African American English, AAE, or what we call Ebonics, in my home and community. There's that ways of knowing, there's the cultural meaning making in terms of the language. And at home, he had a governance formation as he was going into the social structure. Let's go. He says, I learned sign language at the age of 12. I struggled with my identities as a Black, deaf young girl. Identity exploration is a natural part of adolescence, but because of that, it's also a time of confusion. Now, here's where the thing just becomes a thing. I almost make you want to mist up and tear up. She says, after a frustrating experience in public school, I transferred to the segregated Alabama school for the Negro, deaf, and blind. Unbeknownst to me, was basal in its originality. BASL, Black American Sign Language, I would say a physical extension of the verbal Ebonics. At my new school, I found a sense of belonging within the community and embraced Black deaf culture and language. I learned the language by following along with my fellow students. Later, I graduated from the integrated Alabama School for the Deaf and Gallaudet University. Fast forward to my entering Gallaudet University's Administrative and Supervision PhD program. It was when the fullness of my experience with Black American Sign Language hit me. I contemplated George Vedet's quotation, quote, sign language is the noblest gift God has given to deaf people. I also contemplated a quote I had come across in Ernest Hairston and Linwood Smith's 1983 book, Black and Deaf in America. There is a, quote, black way of signing used by black deaf people in their own cultural milieu, among families and friends in social gatherings and in deaf clubs, end quote. I felt it was the right time to analyze the black sign language that I had learned as a teenager in Alabama. So she got involved in 2005 with the Black ASL Project. Y'all seen me. If you go back in the compendium, look for the and maybe I can find it right quick. If you look for the session, there's a book on the history of what they call Basel, published by Gallaudet University Press, because when you go on the campus of Gallaudet, their student center or their hospitality center, which they have a hotel and a complex, they have a marker there because that's where black people had their thing. And this is, of course, the South Carolina Institution for the Education of the Deaf and Dumb and Blind, founded in 1849, featuring a colored department that would not be integrated until 1967. That's that picture right there. That's that picture right there. I'm sure Baba Cecil Williams knows about it, and we'll hear about it when we go see him in a couple of weeks, thanks to Catherine Adams down there in Orangeburg. So
as you're reading that, I imagine our sign language was forged in the hulls of ships, making their way. You know, like that sign language is probably more epigenetically deeper than any sign language existing. And even to this day, you know, we have nonverbal communication that is absolutely understood no matter where you go in the world. That is so powerful. I was thinking we need another language. There we go. Right. Thank you.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Let me see if I can find it. Let me see. No, let me see. I don't think I will be able to find it in our compendium. Oh, let me see. Give me a second, because I want to make, if I look for it, it may not be updated yet, because I showed everybody. Nope, I can't find it. Anyway, yes, that's all right. It's in the compendium. Yeah, because I won't be able to find it. There's a whole book on it. So this companion book just came out. I saw it in the museum when I was down there to check on how they were going with the HBCU exhibit. They were still putting it in, and I saw this in the bookstore. So it just came out. So I look forward to hearing that conversation with you.
Well, this remembering that we've been doing for the last 306 consecutive Saturdays. Also, I had a conversation this week with Tracy Sherrod as I'm putting together the next phase, and it was weird because she reached out to me and I had been thinking about her, and I was talking to her about these New York Times bestsellers lists. She said, we don't need them, we can create our own list. We'll create our own list, which will be, these awards were created by people with a particular thought. They are all made up, and we place so much value on them because they have made it valuable. But these things we can make valuable, the things that we create. And I think we should be more intentional about that as well.
Absolutely. We are our best source, the people. And as you said that, Kim Lucas just put in the Nubia Mbongi, I study ASL at Newark Public Library on Saturdays. It's an amazing language. Most important is learning deaf culture. We will be visiting Gallaudet this year. This is what we do. In conversation, not everybody, this is the place. Let me bring what I do. And we already got everything we need. You're right, Pra. We don't need, we just need each other.
Period. All right. Love you.
Love you too. Love you too. See you all Monday night in office hours for everybody's here. And if you all, even if you're a newbie, go smash that like button and all that. Just, what do you call it? Freak the algorithm? These people coming back. Love you. See you all.